Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
I don't know.
You have to have a favorite. What comes to mind?
You are listening to Scream with Ryan C. Showers, the podcast for Scream fans just like you. Join Ryan every week as he takes a deep dive into the horror film series that defined the 90s and redefined the genre. Scream with Ryan C. Showers is your source for scene and quote analysis, character dissections, and the latest news about upcoming installments of the Scary Movie franchise.
I hear you like horror movies, Kirby, but do you like them as much as him?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Scream with Ryan C. Showers podcast, where the film critic meets the Scream fan twice a week, every Tuesday and Friday. I'm your host, Ryan C. Showers. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. Before I go any further, I need to thank the producers and administrators of Scream with Ryan C. Showers. First, I need to thank TJ Jones, who does all of the graphic design work from the podcast. Also, I need to thank Ashley Summers, Mark Vieira, Sarah Campbell, and Sam Levy for helping me keep the podcast and Patreon community afloat. Thank you to everybody who subscribes to the Patreon at any and every tier. I'm an independent entity, so any bit of support that comes into the Patreon goes back into the podcast. Joining the Patreon gets you ad-free and early access to every episode, as well as the opportunity to join the community of the show. We have group chats across social media. In particular, Instagram is really the hub of the podcast community. More importantly, joining the Patreon is the vessel in which you would use to come onto the podcast, either in a one-on-one situation with me or a small panel. In addition, there's a guaranteed invite every month to a big group Zoom recording about a Scream topic. An exciting feature of the podcast is the audio commentary episodes. Every Scream fan knows what it was like listening to Wes Craven do the audio commentaries for the original trilogy and Scream 4, with Marianne Maddalena and Kevin Williamson and Patrick Lussier. And what I'm trying to do for my Patreon subscribers is I am going to be performing an audio commentary of a Scream or a Scream-related movie, one per month, every month. And my goal is to try to approach these as I'm doing deep analytical analysis about the characters, about the themes, about just general reaction. So it's something that I'm really proud of and I hope continues to be a cherished part of the podcast. So the commentary is available as a normal podcast episode for anybody to listen to like they would any other podcast, but it will also be available as a video watch along. So everybody, please go over to Patreon, subscribe to Scream with RCS. I would be eternally grateful. So I need to go through and thank everybody over at Patreon who is subscribed as a stab investor or a daddy/mama Ghostface. So the daddy/mama Ghostface of the Patreon are Carrie Tenney, Brett Janovich, Corey Wilson, and Stevie Shears. The stab investors include Allie, Amar Karim, Tamika Jones, David D., Gustavo Mora, Jess Mariano, Joey Nobarini, aka The Vault, Josh Calamari, Josh Carr, Scream Queens podcast, both Josh and Justine, The Horror Project podcast, Kevin Abner, Mark Vieira, PWO5, aka Philip Douglas, Quentin Harrison, and Sam Levy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Scream with Ryan C. Showers. I'm your host, Ryan C. Showers. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. Oh my goodness. So I am doing this episode that was inspired by a social media post that I made recently about Neve Campbell, which was inspired by one of the songs on Taylor Swift's new album called Father Figure. And I had this revelation while listening to this song and making this post, because on Instagram, they allow you to not only, choose the photo, write the caption, pick the music. This started out as just like a very innocuous post about Neve. It was a picture of her, and I was kind of like playing on some of the lines in the song about kind of like that she protects the family, right? That she protects Scream, that she is the person, who's in charge. And it kind of spiraled. I mean, first of all, it was a very popular post. It went, a lot of people really engaged with it and had a lot of positive, fun things to say about Neve, which I really appreciated. But as I was thinking about the post and thinking about Neve throughout the day, it sat with me. I kept going deeper and deeper into this thought about who Neve is in relation to the Scream franchise and everything that she's contributed to the Scream franchise. And it also, that kind of led to me thinking, about who is the leader of the franchise, and I want to talk about being a leader and having the responsibility of an IP like this on your shoulders and kind of what the responsibility is. And then that kind of led to a revelation I had about the Scream 5 and 6 era, because I think you can't really argue against the fact that the first 4 films, Wes Craven was undoubtedly the leader of that era. The thing is, I want to say about this is I value the contributions of everybody. I don't think that proclaiming that this person is the leader of the franchise at this time doesn't dim the value of the contributions of other people who were involved. So for instance, me saying that I think Wes Craven was the leader of the Scream franchise for the first 4 films, I don't think that is a diss to Kevin Williamson, who wrote 3 of those first 4 scripts. I think it's a diss of Marianne Maddalena, who was his filmmaking partner? No, I don't. What I mean is that the buck stops with him. He is responsible for the vibe on set. He's responsible for the vision. He is the person who was responsible for pushing everyone forward in times of turbulence, which the first 4 films had their very own versions of, right? With the studio meddling, the MPAA, different filming problems, actors' schedules. And it's the responsibility of the leader to kind of say it's okay to charge forward and to make sure everyone feels comfortable and that everyone feels valued and that the movies keep going on and despite whatever noise is going on. And it just occurred to me while I was sitting here, without Dad, for instance, with Wes Craven, I think that Neve has assumed the leadership role of the Scream franchise and the Scream era in today's world. And I don't think it's weird because I think that she was always the leader after Wes passed. I don't think that it could have been anybody else, right? Because of the nature of the Scream franchise in terms of being something that the fans valued for being about the same characters with the same director. That consistency is so important. And because, for instance, Kevin Williamson was obviously heavily involved in the first, he wrote the second and fourth, but he didn't see 2 and 4 through to the end. He wasn't really involved with 3 outside of a producer credit. And then he had some say, right, with 5 and 6, I guess, sure, if you squint, being a producer as well, but he hasn't been on the same journey of Scream as Neve was. And this kind of relates back to the Taylor song, it's called Father Figure. It's on The Life of a Showgirl. And the arc of that song is about the eclipsing power of an older, more veteran person taking on an ingenue. And then eventually the ingenue takes over the empire. And that's kind of what happened with Neve Campbell. Thinking about the song of Taylor's and Neve Campbell's situation and her contributions to the franchise, just it really has deeply affected me. And I want to convey this because I think it's impressive how Neve Campbell has fostered this franchise. And it just having this revelation about her as the leader of it, right, has given me so much of a deeper understanding of what the franchise really is right now and just how much it wouldn't work without her. And I want to explain why I think she's the leader and how her actions and her contributions led to this path, but specifically why she is in the unique position that she is in right now. And I'm not saying that, for instance, Kevin Williamson won't become a co-leader with her of the franchise as it goes forward. But I definitely think that right now, Neve Campbell is the father figure of Scream. She is the matriarch. She is the daddy. She is the class act. She's the person who everyone is looking to keep going and to have a direction and steer the ship in that way for better and worse, right? My post started out. It said, Neve Campbell gave us ... a groundbreaking final girl in Sidney Prescott. An amazing original trilogy, a brilliant reunion movie with Scream 4. She was a team player in Scream 5 despite being pushed aside. Yes, I know that was a little bit of shade. Don't care. It's true. And 5, she single-handedly saved the franchise by putting Scream 7 into motion despite a scandal that she had nothing to do with. The Scream empire belongs to Neve. Her portrait's on the mantle. She protects the family. And of course, those last few sentences were a riff on the Father Figure song. And this kind of led me spiraling. So, okay, let's break this down a little bit farther. And this kind of comes in the culture of a place where Scream fans, we talk about, sometimes which character or what represents a franchise, right? A lot of people will look at, the big horror slashers, right? You have Jason, Freddy, Michael Myers, right? And with Scream, it's a bit different because there is kind of a B-plot argument online between fans, where people want to argue about who represents Scream, who is Scream. Is it Ghostface or is it Neve Campbell as Sidney Prescott? And of course, you probably know where I'm going to fall, right? I'm going to say it's Neve Campbell and Sidney Prescott and not Ghostface. And it's funny because in my heart of hearts, I deeply, deeply believe that for a long time. And especially because growing up, so in just the original trilogy, Ghostface is mentioned very little, as the name Ghostface. In fact, whenever I was growing up, I never actually called him Ghostface. I called him the Killer because that's what Sydney and Gail call him. I call him the Killer, not Ghostface. And so I think the idea of even talking about Ghostface as Ghostface didn't really even begin until maybe Scream 4-ish. We heard more people using that phrase Ghostface in Scream 4, but it wasn't really as much of a thing until the Scream 5 radio silence era, where if you look at Scream 5 and 6, they're obviously more catering to Ghostface than they are to any of the characters, and that's therein lies the problem, right? And therein lies Neve Campbell saying, "I would like to focus on suspense and not gore and character development. Let's focus on character development instead of the bullshit." And yeah, Sam didn't really feel like Scream, right? So it's all connected if you think about everything, right? My friend TJ, he does the graphic design work. He has often referenced how Radio Silence gave Ghostface such a visual stamp in these movies. Like there are some amazing shots of Ghostface that trump those of Wes's films, and I actually agree to an extent. Like the shot of Ghostface in the kitchen with Tara before the knife comes down and slashes, and the shots in the bodega of the old Billy Loomis mask, the shots on the subway. I mean, there's some really haunting, iconic imagery of Ghostface that again, that wasn't really the focus of Scream before. And I think that's part of the wrestling that people have had with these new movies, which is, the identity crisis of where the Radio Silence films were pushing Scream to go versus where Scream used to be. And it does seem as though Neve Campbell kind of, again, being the leader of the franchise, being the daddy, came in, stepped in and said, we aren't doing this anymore. But going back to my original point with that tangent, growing up, I didn't even really register Ghostface as Ghostface. I registered him just as the killer. I liked the mask. I liked the costume, but he's not even on the posters for 1, 2, and 3, right? It's the cast. Obviously, I mean, this is partially motivated by money because I guess somewhere along the way, it's been deemed more profitable for Ghostface to be pushed in marketing more than the actors, which is fine. Whatever sells, whatever gets people to the cinema, buying tickets, whatever, it doesn't matter. But for me, going back to this debate that people have online, is it Neve Campbell's franchise or is it Sidney Prescott's franchise or is it Ghostface's franchise? Does it matter? Probably not. But it's just something interesting to think about. I think for the first 4 movies, I think it was Neve Campbell's franchise. I think for Radio Silence, it was Ghostface. And one thing I've realized over the past couple of days, thinking about this who is the leader argument, influenced by the song Father Figure, is there was no real leader in the Radio Silence era. I think in Scream 5, everyone was really trying their best. I think everyone was on high alert. Fans were toxically positive because we wanted this to be real. We were just so eager to have Scream back. Everyone was on their best behavior. Everyone was trying to manifest something positive. And I think that's how 5 kind of slid by without a dominant presence. But then you come to Scream 6 and we got the movie we got because there wasn't that Wes Craven master hand over the series guiding it in the right direction. And, one thing I guess I realized here is maybe it was Neve the whole time. Maybe she was the leader of Scream 5 in the Scream 5 era, more than we gave her credit for, despite her lack of screen time in the film and narrative importance and the material that they had for her, right? Maybe it was her the whole time. If you think about the marketing of Scream 5, whose face was the biggest on the poster, who did all of those interviews, who was the guiding force of that, who was the calming presence. Even if she wasn't the sole focus, she was still probably the closest thing to a leader that we had. And I think that when you take away that, right? So that's how we ended up in the mess we did with Scream 6. Well, so going back to what Neve Campbell has contributed to the Scream franchise. So my first point here, she was a groundbreaking final girl in Sidney Prescott. And this is not to be overstated. Of course, she was a great final girl. Duh. Right? But what I'm saying here more is Sidney Prescott really redefined what a final girl was. I don't think we'll ever have a final girl, a reckoning with a final girl like we did with Sidney Prescott, where she changed the game from the Laurie Strode era into something different, pivoting away from more damsel in distress type final girls into severe, strong, and the type of final girl, right? The type of final girl that we saw grow over 5, now, I guess, 6 movies over many decades, where she's had this consistent through line and emotional arc and journey. There's that, but there's a certain toughness and intelligence to Sidney and a darkness because of her past that it was just, she was a different type of final girl. She broke the mold for final girl. I don't think that we're ever going to see another final girl in cinema like we have in Sidney Prescott. There's a subtlety to her. There's a power to her. There's a reason why people keep coming back to Scream for her. Even so one of my old jobs, there was a secretary at that office and she was watching the Scream movies for the first time. And she, as the series went on, by the time she got to Scream 5 and Scream 6, she felt Sidney was her girl, but one of the things that they didn't like about the later movies is how much Sydney was phased out. Someone who is so not online, who's not in the culture of the horror world, who's just watching these movies and enjoying them. And it's just like, oh, of course, she's the heroine, right? Okay. So groundbreaking final girl. Next is the amazing original trilogy. Not only was she that new type of final girl, but they humanized her with Scream 2. They gave her emotional completion with Scream 3. Her talents were especially put to good use within the horror genre, which at the time really wasn't known for amazing acting. And I can't stress enough how rare the original Scream trilogy is in terms of the quality, in terms of having that consistency with the talent, right? With behind the camera, in front of the camera, in the short time span that were all super successful, all have staying power. That is something really, really rare. And Neve Campbell led that original trilogy. You can achieve a complete trilogy with the same actor in all three in the horror genre, but it's very, very rare. Campbell deserves credit for being the lead of that trilogy, right? And she deserves credit for headlining the brilliant reunion movie in Scream 4 that had this really strong social message. But even within the Scream 4 acting style of Neve Campbell, it's very different, right? There's an internal world that she gives to Sidney Prescott. But the most important thing about Neve Campbell and her contributions here is she is the figurehead who gets to deliver that message that is, don't fuck with the original. And we get to see the final girl 10 years after the fact in a fourth iteration, which is rare. Each time Sidney Prescott appears, she becomes more and more special because it's just like the longer she has lived on and continuing to grow and evolve throughout the years and decades. So here we go with Scream 5. I wrote, she was a team player in Scream 5 despite being pushed aside. And I chose those words very carefully because I think that, I don't know, and I don't know what Neve Campbell would say. Did Neve Campbell feel pushed aside? There's a part of me that feels like maybe she really was happy to pass the torch to the next generation. In my heart, do I believe that? No, I don't think she was. I think she probably saw what Jamie Lee Curtis had with 2018. And based on the way that she talked about her value with Scream 6, she probably wanted to have that Jamie Lee Curtis big moment for herself too, especially because Sydney was the more consistent character than Laurie. She paid her dues in her time in the first 4 films, and she deserved to come back and have the cultural zeitgeist moment that Jamie Lee Curtis had. And she gets to have it now with Scream 7. And regardless of how Neve herself personally feels, it doesn't really matter in some respects, because it's also how the fans feel and how people absorbed the Sidney Prescott in Scream 5. While a lot of people do love the look, the attitude, the funny, cutesy phone call, right? And Sidney coming in wanting to be badass. A lot of people really love that, but a lot of people also feel like we got really screwed with Sidney in Scream 5, and we deserved a better version of Sidney in Scream 5. And it's funny, I want to just flashback to everybody. So when Scream 5 came out, because of the trailer, and because at this time, I was starting the podcast. I was really waving the flag of Neve Campbell is amazing in Scream 3. I mean, that is the thesis of the podcast. That's where I live, and that was my thing. And then to see the Scream 5 trailer and it be front and center Neve Campbell everywhere, right? And we see Neve delivering the lines and I won't sleep until he's in the ground. And, I'm Sidney fucking Prescott. Well, she didn't say fucking in the trailer, but she said, I'm Sidney Prescott. Of course I have a gun. And, all those images of her that we saw, it just ended up being like, oh, that's the entire performance. I was so amped up for Neve in Scream 5. And then I remember leaving the theater, and I really liked Scream 5 at the time. I loved it, but I felt so disappointed in Sydney. I felt like, especially because of the build-up and the hype of Neve giving the story of, oh, Radio Silence wrote me a letter, we can't do the movie without you, blah, 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 blah. It kind of just made me feel a little dispirited. I felt like, what a waste of Sydney. I felt like I didn't get to see Sydney. The way I feel about Gale in Scream 6 is kind of how I felt about Sydney in Scream 5. It's just, I felt like robbed of the potential and of what we were promised, if that makes sense. So anyways, but despite that, Neve was a team player in Scream 5, despite being minimized in the narrative. She's the one who sold the movie, too. Of anybody, because Jenna Ortega her star was still rising at that time. And she didn't really promote Scream 5. She was filming Wednesday. So she didn't go to the premiere. She didn't do the interview circuits. She was MIA during the promotion of Scream 5. So again, there are some people on the Facebook groups who really, they're really fucking annoying. They're like, oh, Jenna Ortega saved Scream. Girl. Okay, sure. But, the fact that Neve, she still showed up. She did her part. She was with David and Courtney. And Scream was obviously moving in a direction that she didn't really get much of a say in, right? And frankly, it doesn't even seem like Kevin Williamson really even got a true say in the direction of Scream. It feels like, Spyglass acquired the rights. They got Guy and Jamie involved. And so Guy and Jamie have talked about this, that they were given like a portfolio of all the things that Spyglass owned or something. And they picked Scream to be the thing that they wanted to cover. And like, it just seems like they were very much the people who spearheaded the new generation and the requelization of Scream. And it just feels like nobody else got a say except for the writers there. And that just seems weird. Like if I was acquiring Scream and I was wanting to revamp Scream, I would go to Neve Campbell. Like if I was Guy and Jamie, in 2018, 2019, I would go to Neve and Kevin and be like, and see how much she wanted to be involved. And clearly that didn't happen. And that's disappointing. In fact, like I can actually vouch for this, that at least David Arquette and Courtney Cox didn't know. I tweeted with David Arquette in 2018 or 19 or whenever it was that Scream 5 was announced. There was a press release that went out. I took to Twitter, as I do, right? I mean, that's not the most Ryan C. Showers thing ever. I took to Twitter and I tweeted at David and Courtney because Neve didn't have Twitter. And I said something to the effect of like, oh, I hope you guys come back. It wouldn't be the same without you. And he wrote a very considered response. I was shocked to get this response. He basically said it would be a somber set without Wes. I hope that there's a complete script and blah, 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 blah. But basically like that he had no idea about anything about Scream 5. And like that kind of coincides with whenever they were filming Scream 5, he went on The View. He said, oh yeah, I'm playing Dewey again, but I don't know anything else, right? But clearly the trio knew nothing about it. And they were just appendages to this new generation that was going forward. And kind of to my point is like, and again, this is the root of the problem of we had no leader, right? Again, I think step one is to talk to Neve and see how much she wanted to be involved and kind of then take the step two of figuring out what the story could be with or without her or with her in a small role, whatever she wanted, right? So that didn't happen. But yet Neve, she showed up. She was the last of the three of the trio to sign on, and she was a team player. She did her thing. She helped promote the film and whatever. I was just thinking about this too. If you look at Scream 5, I see Neve trying to play Sydney like she used to play her. Right. In the finale, like the emotional eye work that Neve is so famous for, I think Neve is really trying to give us that and trying to give us the Sydney attitude. But there's just something about the radio silence formula and the radio silence style that doesn't allow the old Sydney to come through, because they have this new version of Sydney or this reduced version of Sydney, this watered down version of Sydney that doesn't translate. And it's just weird because like radio silence, like in the finale of Scream 5, it's been so well documented about the close-up shots on their faces. And yet that was their style. That's what radio silence wanted to do with making the Scream movie. Yet I feel like that could have been such a great thing for a Neve Campbell performance, but for some reason their style as directors did not click with the Neve Campbell style as Sidney Prescott, in my opinion. Because like even though Neve is trying to serve, she can't serve. If you watch the finale, like, she's really trying, but for some reason the filmmaking isn't connecting with her so that they both are on the same wavelength to really make it effective, in my opinion. But whatever, tangent. So this is where I'm going to kind of interrupt the post here because I've gone through what Neve Campbell gave us. She gave us groundbreaking Final Girl, an amazing original trilogy, a brilliant reunion movie. She was a team player in Scream 5 despite being pushed aside. And the last point here is that she single-handedly saved the franchise by putting Scream 7 into motion despite the scandal that she had nothing to do with. So, okay, back from 1996 to 2015, the leader of the franchise was obviously Wes. He carried the burden of a lot of the problems and kept the movies going, gave everyone involved a reason to keep going. He had the vision, he had the direction. He was the one who kept things under control. And when he passed, that's when Scream recoiled and kind of went dormant. And like, here's the thing, and why some people may be uncomfortable with me, like some older fans, and I'm just because I want to give the full perspective. This isn't just a Neve love fest. I think Neve has had a winding road here, and why I wouldn't say she was the leader of the franchise in the first iteration. One, because Wes Craven is just such a force. He is the thing that towers over everything else. He is the solid hand over keeping all of the coalition together. But she had a winding road with the original films. Even though she was so important, and Sidney is so important to the success of the original trilogy, I wouldn't have called Neve the leader per se. I think Wes was easily the leader. He not only was the director, he was keeping the glue of those movies together and the culture around the movies. And while Neve, she had some hesitancy to return in Scream, 3 and 4 and 5, right? She had to be courted by them for literally all of the sequels. It came from a place of not wanting to limit her career as a horror actress, as the Scream girl. Like Jamie Lee Curtis has talked about at length after Halloween 2 back in the 80s. She was done with horror. If she felt as though she was going to have a career, she needed to distance herself and show the different sides of her. So this is forgivable and understandable. Like, I get Neve's point of view, and I'm just happy that Neve was open-minded enough to Wes to come back and to hear him out and for understand the creative vision that it didn't work without her and kind of giving herself to that. And I mean, let's not, make it so like saintly, right? It was also, it's a business, it's a money, it's a job. It's a paycheck for her. But, some people have interpreted Neve's previous hesitation to come back to Scream as a strike in her column. And I don't really see it that way because the arc of history now is she has fully embraced it. She has fully embraced being the Scream girl, having Cindy Prescott as the central part of her career, as her legacy. I think the way that she interacts with fans at the conventions, and it's funny because like I'm not an expert on convention culture. I've only been to one convention my entire life, and I feel like just from my memory and from social media, I feel like conventions really exploded within the last maybe 8 years. It seems like there was always some form of convention, but it seems like Neve and Skeet and Matthew, they were doing conventions before conventions were as big as they are in today's world. And I think that Neve did a lot of groundwork from, let's just say, 2015 to 2000. Let's just say 23, before Scream 7. She built up a lot of goodwill with fans by being humble and kind of genuine and warm to them in these conventions and showing this side of herself. And, similar to Jamie Lee Curtis, right? Where Jamie Lee Curtis kind of fought the Scream Queen attribute of her career as to not limit her other potential possibilities in acting work. I think that Neve and Jamie Lee both came to, they had like a come to Jesus moment where it's like, oh, I've been trying to do so much else and I have done other things, but this is what I'm known for. This is what I'm loved for. And this is what I'm going to give myself to. Similar to Jamie Lee kind of doing the Blumhouse movies, which again, were motivated probably by money. Doing those films, doing 3 of those films, doing them so enthusiastically has been an embracing of this part of her legacy. That's great. And I just want to take it one step further as a leader within a system or a company or a franchise like this. Leadership comes in all shapes and forms, and it can manifest in different ways. So here's a good example of why I think Neve Campbell is appropriately the leader of the Scream franchise. When she's asked to kind of pit the sequels up against each other, she doesn't try to diss them. She kind of says, I enjoyed making all of the films. This has always been something about Neve Campbell to me that makes her stand out from other celebrities. I don't like when artists try to manipulate opinion in the pop culture about their own work. I feel so strongly on a principle stance that artists put out the work into the world, and then the world gets to decide what to do with that art. Artists don't get to dictate to fans what they want them to believe about their work. I think artists do the work, they put it out, they're positive about it, they're professional, and then the fans get to interpret it and keep going forward. Like Neve Campbell, you say, I enjoyed making all of the films. Thank you very much for supporting my career. Like, that is the appropriate thing to say, not, oh, well, I like 1. I don't really like 2. 3 was hard to film. 4 was this. Like, shut the fuck up. No one cares. That is not how you win over things. And again, the number one thing for being a leader is being professional. First of all, having power, feeling power, having the confidence, but also professionalism is such a key component of being a leader. And I can't think of anybody who is more professional in the Scream franchise than Neve Campbell. I think even the way that she talked about her exit from Scream 6 was incredibly professional, and within it setting up and validating the fact is that she was kind of the leader of the Scream franchise, and the studio and radio silence and the narrative approach and I guess the business approach of her salary, it was like not allowing Neve to inherit what she should have been inheriting as the dominant force. Okay. So, I think if you look back at the radio silence era, and we are still, it's funny sitting here in 2025, at the end of 2025 when their first movie came out in the early month of January of 2022. Even though it's only been 3 years, I feel like it's been forever. It feels like another life ago. It feels like another decade ago. Recently, I feel as though I've gained such perspective on the era of Scream 5 and 6 because, if you think about it, we're at the end of 2025 here. We haven't had a Scream movie since March of 23. That's a long ass time, you know? The separation really is making it feel like Scream 7 is chapter 1 of a new era, which it should be. Like I would love for the Kevin Neve era to be distinctly different from the Radio Silence era. So, you know, but part of my reflection recently is I kind of had the light bulb moment that there was no real leader in the Radio Silence era. I think, again, going back to what I said earlier, like I think that like everyone was trying really hard with Scream 5. Like I think the writers did a very aggressive script in Scream 5. I think that the trio all showed up and they were all trying to be the veterans, you know, and occupy their space, but also not feel like they're upstaging the new cast. And the new cast, you know, we can't even go there. I mean, like, I think that it's hard for young actors to immediately assume the role of being a leader. And I think this is why, like, you know, I would look at Halloween, the original Halloween films. In those first 3 movies, you know, 1978, 1981, and Season of the Witch, the person who was the leader of that was obviously John Carpenter. You know, his directing vision, he wrote Halloween 2, helped with the filmmaking of Halloween 2, was like instrumental in curating Season of the Witch because that was his baby. That was his vision. He wanted it to be an anthology series. And then after that, he was done. He was done as, you know, within the franchise, he was done as the leader, whatever. The franchise spun off. I would not say that Jamie Lee Curtis was the leader of the Halloween franchise until H2O. Essentially because by then, you know, John Carpenter, she wanted John and Deborah to be involved and they weren't. I think Mustafa Akkad probably was the leader of the Halloween franchise between 4 and, you know, the time of his death probably as the producer, you know, and as the person who wanted to keep Michael alive and going. And that's why you know, that era of 4 onward through Blumhouse, it feels patchy, you know. I think there were traces of Jamie Lee Curtis being the leader of the Halloween franchise within H2O, but her motivations were different. She wanted to end the franchise. So I think had it ended with H2O, had there been no resurrection and the whatever, you know, I think that we could look back and say confidently that she was the leader that ended the franchise, but it didn't go on that way, and she obviously didn't want to be involved. I think there's no other way to look at it other than Jamie Lee Curtis being the leader of the Blumhouse era. I know some people would say David Gordon Green, but who do you think really exerted more power, more inspiration from the team, the public? It was obviously Jamie Lee Curtis, not David Gordon Green. David Gordon Green may have been the driving force narratively, but if you look at the holistic leader of the movement, it was obviously Jamie Lee Curtis. But she didn't immediately get that, right? So that's kind of my point is like, and Neve didn't have that per se, I think, for the original trilogy in 4. That was driven by Wes Craven. Like, he was the dominant force. He was the father figure, to quote Taylor Swift, you know, and just like Jamie Lee is different because she comes from a long line of Hollywood royalty. She's been in so many movies that have been seen by the world and like the public in a way that Neve Campbell just hasn't, right? So she is just kind of a titanic force. You know, everyone knows who Jamie Lee Curtis is. She's a very passionate person. Like, her energy takes up a room. And so obviously she is going to be the leader of the Blumhouse era. Applying it to Neve, I think that like Neve, as she's assumed being the leader in this new era of Scream, I think that she's definitively the leader because for the pure fact of like, you know, she was a team player with Scream 5, kind of recognized the red flags. She's not in Scream 6 because she doesn't feel like she's valued and paid her worth. Scream goes into a complete PR disaster, and she's the one who cleans up the mess and brings Kevin Williamson on board, brings the rest of the cast on board. She's the one who puts her neck out. She's the one who puts her name to the ink, and she's the one who goes and does these interviews on the BAFTA red carpets and says, I don't want the franchise to die. That is what a leader does. Leaders make hard decisions in hard moments, and they stand by professionally. Leaders aren't consumed by the vanity of their own specific ambitions. I think that the scandal with Melissa Barrera allowed Neve Campbell to ascend and inherit the franchise as she probably should have in the first place. And with Scream 5 and 6, like, okay, so going back to this, I think Scream 5 I think that Neve was probably the de facto leader of Scream 5, but no one would let her lead, right? It was just like, it should have been Neve the whole time. And, you know, they were trying to move it into this new era with the younger cast. Radio Silence really wanted to do their thing, even they're pretending that they were honoring Wes. The writers were pushing this storyline. The younger cast was getting so much of the focus. Neve Campbell barely has anything to do in the movie, yet she's the solid force that is promoting the movie. And marketing the movie. I think that if I had to assign a leader in the Scream 5 era, in the Scream 5 moment, it would have been Neve. It had to have been Neve. It couldn't have been anybody else. And then when you take the de facto leader, or the person who's the soft leader of this moment where everyone is kind of putting their hands in the cauldron to make something work, and then you take the one person who is the foundation of that. When you take that away, that's how you get Scream 6. That is how you get the fallout of Scream 6 to Scream 7 and the exit of Melissa Barrera, the controversy around Melissa Barrera, Christopher Landon coming and going, Jenna Ortega not being involved. Like, you get chaos when there is not that dominant force, that dominant, person who's guiding the light. Just think about this. Imagine if Wes Craven were still making Scream movies. He was alive. Do you think that we would have ever experienced something as catastrophic as we did, going from Scream 6 to Scream 7, if Wes Craven was still involved, if he was still directing, if he was still the leader of the franchise? Do you think that he would have let that happen? And just think about this. Like, had Neve Campbell been more involved with 5, had she been in 6, she probably would have had more of the power to help keep everything from spinning out of control as it did. Radio Silence, the new cast, they all had their own interests at heart at that moment, and their own interests kind of came out right after Scream 6. Radio Silence, they would rather do a movie like Abigail. They want to do cool whatever projects. Miss I Think I'm Better Than Scream, Jenna Ortega, has no investment, no care. She doesn't even really want to do Scream 6. It's so self-evident in the way that she's acting in Scream 6. And Melissa, I mean, that's a whole other can of worms. But, they all had their different intentions, their own motivations, and Spyglass wanted to make money, and maybe Spyglass just didn't truly understand how vital Neve Campbell and Sidney Prescott were to Scream, and like this, everything that happened kind of gave them a huge dose of reality. The arc of going from Scream 6 to no Neve in Scream 6 to the loss of Melissa Barrera, and coming back around to Neve Campbell being the person who kind of cleans up their mess and kind of takes a hold of the franchise, as she should have the whole time. It's kind of like the perfect story if you think about it. I think the fact that Scream 6 went off the rails so much, the fact that they let that script get through from like pre-production to production, first red flag, that there was no real guiding force and guiding leader. That obviously. 2, that they, all of the problems that arose with Scream 6 in the production of it all, with like the acting, and like the type of killers and the type of violence that Neve has talked about. Imagine if Wes Craven or Neve Campbell were in charge at this time. Do we think they would have let any of that slide? I don't think so. I think that just like the quality in the movie of Scream 6 shows that there was no dominant force. And a lot of people, the default setting would be that the directors were going to be the new leaders. And a lot of people would probably argue that Matt and Tyler were the leaders of this era. And I don't know. I don't think that they have the alpha sensibilities to truly be leaders in the way that Wes Craven was the patriarch of the franchise. I don't think that they had the confidence. I don't think that they had the courage of their convictions, or even like maybe even control of like the filmmaking itself to truly be the gangster in the Taylor Swift song, to guide the movies in the way that they needed to be, to truly have control of the franchise and to be guiding it in the right way. And I think that's why Scream 6 as a movie itself is a mess, right? And then just the fact that they bailed so easily and so quickly, that they were prioritizing other projects over finishing off their venture with Scream and Scream 7. Doesn't that kind of just show and reflect the time that we're in, where nothing truly matters? Like, no commitment really matters anymore. It's all about moving on for your own personal journey, right? There's no greater calling, there's no greater sense of oneself, and I know that Wes Craven wanted to make, here's a good example, Music of the Heart, and he also did Scream 3. That was part of his deal, was he would do Music of the Heart with Meryl Streep and Scream 3, but he saw Scream through, and that was important to him. It was important for him to do it with Neve Campbell and Courtney Cox and David Arquette. And he made it happen. And because he was the guiding force, he was the person who had the best interests of Scream and fought for the interests of Scream while making it, right? I don't think it was Radio Silence. People have analyzed Dermot Mulroney's performance and kind of thought like, part of the problem here with his acting is there's nobody pushing back at him or helping to shape this character or this work. He is just going out there raw, and unfiltered, blowing in the wind. And because he was a bigger actor, some people have suggested, well, maybe, obviously there were writing issues, but I think the problem with Dermot's performance is more of a directing issue. I don't think that Matt and Tyler stepped up to the plate to curate that performance to be a better version of what Dermot was trying to go for. The way that Wes Craven probably worked with Laurie Metcalf is not the way that Radio Silence worked with Dermot Mulroney. And I think that there's almost like maybe they were intimidated by him. Maybe that's why there was no notes given, to him. But the fact that they couldn't stand up to him and be like, hey, Dermot, let's do this again. Hey, Dermot, let's try it this way. I think that shows you that they didn't really have the gusto to truly be leaders in that moment. But even like look at, Radio Silence with Melissa Barrera. I mean, look how controversial her acting was in Scream 5. The lead main character delivered a performance that a lot of people truly hated. A lot of people think that that is a truly awful, bad acting performance. And not even just like isolated moments, but just like until the very end where she kind of gets to own Richie. It's just crazy to me that like a director would allow that in a Scream movie where the actors and the characters are so important, where you're filling the shoes of these titans. They would let it slide that they would allow their lead actress to give a controversial performance. Like, that just shows to me a lack of power within their filmmaking process. Like, how can they be the leaders when they can't even get good performances out of their lead actress and their killers, right? So there you go. But, some people would say that Melissa Barrera was the leader in Scream 6 onwards. Anyways, I think that there's an argument to be made there. Maybe she was. If there was a leader for Scream 6, it probably was Melissa. She had a lot to prove going from Scream 5 to Scream 6. But as I said earlier, like, it's hard for actors to assume leadership roles and motivations and feelings and vibes when they're still so young within a franchise and within an IP. Jamie Lee Curtis not really becoming the leader until 20 years later, literally. And maybe this not having a historical leader, perhaps that's what led to, the downfall of everything from Scream 6 to Scream 7. The results speak for themselves. And I think it's why it's really important to have somebody who is extremely professional being the leader. An interesting thing is Courtney Cox, because I thought in my dream, I wanted Courtney Cox to be the leader. I would have loved for her to have been the leader, and it would make sense. It metaphorically, conceptually, because she was the one person who is in all of the films. But I think like the fact that Courtney has kind of common knowledge now that Courtney doesn't really want to film so much. She kind of wants to come in for 2 weeks, do her scenes, and leave. And so how can one truly be the leader of the franchise if that's all you can contribute? And I'm not blaming Courtney Cox. I think, just because she's not the leader, just because she is not the daddy, the matriarch of the franchise, doesn't mean that she's not important. It doesn't mean that she doesn't have an important role that only she can fill. I think that Courtney Cox's contributions to Scream are so unique to her, so vital to the lifeblood of Scream. She's the only person who can say that she has physically appeared in all 6, 7 movies now. I think that if Courtney Cox wanted to be the leader of Scream, I think that she could have probably pushed back at the horrific writing that Gale was given in Scream 6 to compensate for her chase scene, right? Because if she's only allowed to be on set for so many days, it's just like they invested anything of value into her set piece and nothing else. Nothing else matters to Gale except the phone call and chase scene. And it's a wonderful scene, but there isn't a story around it. And, her writing and the way that she's characterized and the way that she's explained and the way that doesn't really match up with the Gale that we knew from Scream 1 to 5. And it just, nothing about Gale in Scream 6 truly makes sense from a character perspective. To me, that just, there's no leadership there. It's not Courtney Cox's job to rewrite the script. But I think that kind of shows that there was no leader in Scream 6. There was no one guiding the ship thinking, guys, this Gale stuff, this isn't very good. We need to beef this up. We need to do better. We need to do another draft of this. There was just nobody there to push that. Like, imagine if Wes Craven were around, the Wes Craven of the original trilogy and 4, would he look at Gale's part and be like, yeah, guys, this passes the sniff test? It's being a leader is having that extra responsibility to know it and see the bigger picture and be like, this isn't going to age well. We can't give Gale this story. What is the story? So, and the thing is, I wanted Courtney to be the leader so bad. It's not who she is. She has other things that she's doing. She is, and just think about the mentality and the psychology of Courtney. She did Friends. She did Cougar Town. She did these weekly shows where it was kind of like a formula. And maybe that's how she sees Scream, is like she's filming an episode of Scream, right? Instead of an episode of Friends. She's the person who, she always shows up. She loves the franchise. She wants to be involved, but that doesn't mean she has to be the leader. And I respect that. So, and that leaves only Neve Campbell. Just Neve. I want to reread The Winding Road here. And the rise of Neve Campbell and the fall, and then the coming from the ashes to inherit what she always should have had, right? Because let's also talk about who it wasn't. For instance, I think that the writers had a lot to do with driving Scream 5, but you can't say that about Scream 6. There was no grand vision for it. I don't think you can look at the writing of Scream 6 and think those people were in charge. If anything, Scream 6 works in spite of the script, right? I think that that's like the best way to describe Scream 6 and its accomplishments. One thing in like the question mark here is, well, was it Kevin Williamson? Was Kevin Williamson the leader this whole time? I mean, he was a producer. He was overseeing things in a certain way. From what I understand, Kevin didn't really have much creative input in 5 and 6. He was just there for moral support. And moral support counts for something, but it's not everything. And I think, for me, Kevin's contributions are so important to the Scream franchise. That original script is reason enough to be the leader, to be the king. But he wasn't, like I kind of alluded to earlier, he was involved in Scream 2 until he wasn't. He was involved in Scream 4 until he wasn't. He didn't have much creative input in 5 and 6. And the only reason he is here in Scream 7 is because of Neve Campbell. She's the one, there would be no movie without Neve Campbell with Scream 7, right? There would be no movie for him to direct, but for Neve Campbell saying, yes, let's save this franchise. Let's do Sydney justice. I'm taking the reins. I'm cleaning up this mess. This is not how Scream goes down. Without Neve Campbell doing all of that, Kevin doesn't have a movie to direct. And, he's shared, like, she's the one who called him to offer him the directing gig in the first place. So I respect Kevin. And I think that, we'll see how things go. Maybe it will be a true partnership between Neve Campbell and Kevin Williamson through Scream 7 to 8 to 9. And I'm not even saying like Sydney has to be the main character for Neve Campbell to maintain her status as the leader of the franchise, as the matriarch. I think as she has to be important, but if let's just say Tatum, for instance, is the main character in Scream 8, and then it goes back to Sydney in Scream 9, I don't think that Neve loses her leader thing, I think that some people try to say that Halloween, the new Blumhouse trilogy, it was a two-hander between David Gordon Green and Jamie Lee Curtis. As much as I want to believe that, I don't think he drove the vibes as much as Jamie Lee Curtis did. Like, Jamie Lee Curtis was the thing that the crew got up for and that the public got up for. She rallied the team. I don't know if David Gordon Green rallied the team. I think everybody respected him, and he obviously had a really solid idea of what he wanted to say with his franchise, with his version of the franchise. But I don't think that they worked as a team per se. I think that Neve Campbell and Kevin Williamson have the opportunity to work as the team, as like the co-leaders. But we haven't seen Scream 7 yet. We don't know. So it all depends. So I'm not saying that Kevin will never be the leader, but I just think that right now, I don't think that anybody can look at Scream and think that it is anybody else's franchise other than Neve Campbell's. And as I was going back to Scream 6, maybe the leader of the Scream 5 and 6 era was the studio. Maybe it was Spyglass. It seems like, I don't know. There was no leader. That's why the movie sucks. That's why everything fell apart so spectacularly, because there was no one there to keep the glue together like Wes Craven would have, like Neve Campbell would have if she would have been involved at that point. So, the way I was thinking about this is it's almost like a story, right? That Wes Craven is the leader of the franchise for 20 years, and then he passes away. And then Scream is kind of dormant. Then, Scream 5 comes out, and, we have new directors, we have new writers. The original people are involved, kinda, right? And we have a new cast and whatever. And everyone's trying their best, and Scream 5 kind of goes off without a hitch, despite not one single person having that vision or that control over the project, right? And then Neve Campbell herself is there, guiding the marketing, guiding the promotion, and giving permission, to the old fans, like, hey, you can embrace this new requel version of Scream because I'm here and I'm endorsing it. She's giving that permission, right? But she's also, I would love for people to look back at the Scream 5 promotion, because a lot of times, one thing that's important when actors promote a movie, it's not just going on Colbert and Fallon and Kimmel and giving the talking points and answering funny questions about this and saying, oh, I just had such a great time working with insert director name here. Like, it's more than that. And Neve Campbell, if you look at the way she promoted Scream 5, sometimes she and Courtney Cox were kind of put together for interviews or for little clips that they would share on social media. And every time Courtney Cox is asked a question, she kind of fumbles it. It's just her mind just goes everywhere, and she's not really she wanders in the question. And then it goes to Neve, and Neve kind of brings it back down to reality. Neve is incredibly disciplined as it pertains to being media savvy. She has the talking points. She knows what her story is, and she will repeat it with clarity over and over and over again. Look at, how could anybody forget the letter? If you look at the way that Neve Campbell promoted Scream 5, even just compared side by side to Courtney Cox, I mean, let alone David Arquette. David Arquette literally had to tweet out, hey, I'm sorry, I got this fact wrong, because he is such a goofy motherfucker. So, but that wasn't Neve Campbell. She was the solid force in the trio even. She was obviously the most professional of the three of them in terms of staying on message and promoting with clarity and conciseness. And I think that kind of reverberated, where Neve Campbell was that to everyone. It wasn't just the original legacy cast. Her grounded promotion of the film and her grounded message of why everyone should go see Scream 5. That wasn't just with the trio. That was everywhere. She was the solid rock. So maybe she was the leader the whole time. I just don't believe that Spyglass or Radio Silence or the writers or the new cast gave her the permission to actually lead. She was there to promote the film. She was that solid presence, right? She had everybody over to her house that she was renting in North Carolina for a game night, right? All of the new cast and the directors and stuff. She did all of that, but she was never really allowed to fully take charge and ownership of that leadership role just because of the way that the film was positioning her. And even if you say, oh, well, Neve knew what she was signing up for. She knew that she was going to have a supporting role. She was comfortable with passing the torch, blah, blah, blah. Okay, whatever. Rolling my eyes. Doesn't it prove my point that, her not being in Scream 6 was not a line that the studio and the filmmakers weren't willing to cross? Scream 6 went on without her. Everybody moved on without Neve Campbell in Scream 6. And I think that her position and her placement here was not given the respect that it deserved with how important she was to Scream 5. And she's even talked about this in interviews. It's not just the time that she would spend on set acting as Sidney Prescott for the 7, 8, 9 days, whatever she spent on set. It's everything else. It's the promotion of the film. It's the interviews. There's so much more to it than just the filming of her scenes. But she was the rock for the public to see. She's the one who got the movie off the ground and encouraged the public to go see the movie. I don't think that you can look at Scream 5 and think that anybody else truly achieved that. I don't think that anybody else truly had the weight or the power to promote that or to secure those wins in the same way. So Scream 5 relied on her in the literal promotion, the trailers, the posters, etc., but also the way that she conducted herself in those interviews. Like there was something especially more professional, on message, and disciplined than the other cast members. She was the rock of the movie. She was the rock of the cast. She was the rock of everything. Quiet, but she was the rock. She was there kind of doing the work of a leader in a more quiet sense, even though it seemed like nobody really wanted her to be the leader. Now moving on to Scream 6, because this is where things start to get dicey. Is because and why I think the trajectory of her becoming the leader of the franchise is the fact that there was all of her contributions in the first 5 movies. And then in Scream 6, she had a quote controversy about the franchise, right? Which is that she didn't feel like she was getting paid for what she was worth. It was rooted in the professionalism of her role within the franchise. This wasn't unrelated to Scream. This wasn't a problem of Neve Campbell that had nothing to do with Scream that she brought to Scream and made it an issue for the IP. Therefore, Neve taking a stand here was a good thing for the franchise overall. One, because it showed how much of a mess the franchise would be without her, right? Without someone with her history and her experience with the series, and how important she was to the franchise. One, but also she drew a line in the sand here about her value within the franchise. That something didn't feel right, And again, this wasn't Neve Campbell drawing a line in the sand because she didn't like that this producer made this comment about this and blah, 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 blah. It wasn't about her own agenda of anything that was unrelated to the Scream franchise. Her issue was, I have value to this franchise. I bring so much to this franchise. All of that should be recognized by you and by the money that you're paying me. It was directly correlated to the franchise. It was within the world of the franchise. She didn't make something else unrelated to the franchise a problem for the franchise. She was saying there's a problem within the franchise and this needs to be fixed. And by stepping out, I think honestly, Neve being the farthest thing away from Scream 6 and thereby, being the farthest thing away from everything with the Melissa fallout is so wonderful because, you can't say that she had a real arm in the fight if you think about it. She's saying, okay, fine. You don't want to pay me. You don't want to recognize the value that I bring to this franchise. I'm out. And then what happens? Catastrophe. What happens is Mayday, Mayday, but the line in the sand that she drew was about her professional working relationship with the franchise. And, I think being away from the franchise within the storm allowed her to more effectively become the leader of the franchise because she's the one who fixed it. She's the parent who came in after their kid, drops something in the kitchen and makes a huge mess. They're the ones who help clean it up and move forward. That's literally what happened. And it gave her such power. And I think it's such a good fable for people because, sometimes I think people get discouraged by standing by and doing the right thing for ourselves because we feel like it's a waste of time or won't actually result in something. Think about Neve Campbell and think about this story. Think about being a 50-year-old woman in an industry that doesn't value women in particular as they age. And you taking a stand when there's this young hot cast and saying, hey, I'm not going to do this if I'm not paid, and the studio calling your bluff, not giving you what you're owed at that time, and you stepping aside, letting mayhem ensue, then them having to come back to you and ask for your help, and asking for your help in the biggest way. Like, I don't think that anybody else could have effectively resurrected Scream and recuperated Scream other than Neve Campbell. After everything that happened with Scream 6, fallout of Melissa Barrera, et cetera, et cetera. And I just don't think that we can understate how she managed the Scream 7 revamp at a time where it's so, and this is the problem, right? And this is why I respect Neve so much. As Jamie Lee Curtis would say, I respect Neve, right? She pushed through all of the online noise, all of the disruption, all of the negativity, all of the violence. She pushed through that and just focused on the IP and on the franchise and her role within the franchise, and kind of assuming the leadership role to keep it afloat and to fix it and to remedy it and to make sure that Scream didn't die from this. She's the one who brought in Kevin. She's the one who probably kept Courtney on board, pushed through all of the politicization of the franchise, and just focused on the movie and focused on the legacy and focused on the fans. Like, I think it was like January 14th, January 15th, she attended like a BAFTA red carpet event where she talked about Scream. This was, just a couple of months after Melissa parted ways with the franchise. And, the interview asked her about it. She said, I think I'll get a call. I really don't want to see the franchise go away. I think that it's really important that the franchise keeps going, and that basically the summary of what she was saying is like, I will not let this franchise die. Like, it matters too much to fans, and there's so many other people involved here to let it die for a political controversy. And I respect the hell out of that for her, right? And it could have gone another direction. Like, imagine like Neve Campbell was a different person, and they decided, instead of prioritizing the IP and the history of Scream, to basically double down on the politics of it and go further into a political partisan discussion of whatever, and just allow the IP to really become fully enveloped in that. Like, I think that was such a make or break moment. Again, had Neve not agreed to do this movie, I do think that maybe Scream 7 would have gone ahead, but it would have been a very different version of Scream 7. I think it would have been a bust. It would have been a bomb. I think it would have been all new characters, a whole new story, and just something that nobody was really excited for. Without Neve, and without her saying, yes, I'll do the movie, there would be no Kevin, right? There would be no Kevin Williamson as the director. So even though it's extra exciting because it's him, he wouldn't be there without her, right? None of the movie would be here without Neve Campbell, taking the chance at a time when it was unpopular for anybody to stand in support of a movie franchise that allegedly fired its lead actress, right? But so, Neve Campbell is the one who deserves the credit. She's the one who pushed through that. She was the one who was brave enough to put her name on a movie that things could have gone wrong. Kevin could have said, no, I want nothing to do with it. Courtney could have said, no, I want nothing to do with it. The twins couldn't have come back. The talent really could have been like, the stereotype of like, oh, I'm going to stand in solidarity with this, or I can't do this because of that. And my beliefs say I can't do this because of that. Like, it could have gone really, really bad for her. So she took a huge risk kind of by remaining loyal to Scream and by owning Scream. But I think that ownership will pay off, because I think, first of all, I think it's going to be a huge movie. I think it's going to be huge box office. So she's going to be paid what she's worth from the box office receipts. But the quality of the movie and the legacy of Scream 7, I truly believe it's going to be one of, if not the best sequel in the franchise. And I think all of that, you can look to Neve Campbell and be like, none of this would have happened without you. So, and right now, Neve Campbell is, an executive producer. I think she deserves a full producer credit based off of how she kind of rescued the franchise from this moment, from the PR disaster, from taking a movie IP where it was to where it's going. I mean, she is the gangster, right? And like, also just think about this too. The way that she kind of one-upped the studio that previously underestimated her, like, that is gangster level shit. That is Neve Campbell being the Taylor Swift song, The Father Figure, right? Where she turns the tables on them at the end. And she proves that she's the one with the power, that she's the one who made this happen, and that she deserves to be respected, and that she's actually the one who is in charge. But kind of, she saved the IP and single-handedly changed the trajectory of the franchise for the better, I think. I think going back to Sydney is where it should have been anyways. And she did that, right? And she also saved Scream from being, permanently stained by this. Or imagine like a world where there was no Scream 7, like that the controversy around Melissa Barrera actually did kill it. And let's just say that Neve didn't want to return. That would be, ending on Scream 6 and having that lingering aspect of like, the controversy is the last chapter in this story for a long time. That would be a really sad way to think about Scream, for people to talk about Scream. Oh yeah, it died because of this. Now instead, we will always have a next step. The story of Scream did not end with Melissa Barrera being parting ways with the studio. It is that Neve Campbell assumed the role of the leader, that Neve Campbell wanted to make another movie. She got Kevin Williamson to direct, and they made an awesome legacy movie in Scream 7. Regardless if there's a Scream 8 and 9, which there will be, this was such a turning point for the franchise, and it wouldn't have happened without Neve Campbell being brave enough to put her name and her face out there and fully sign on to the idea that she is Scream, that she is, that it's her life and blood that is fixing this franchise. And of course, there have been consequences to that with Melissa's fans and very politically charged people online, but that's what a true leader does. A true leader does the thing that may be unpopular in the moment, but will have long-term success or long-term positive impact. Or leadership also requires a certain level of responsibility to do the thing that is kind of risky, but it's the right thing to do. And I truly believe that's what Neve Campbell was doing, on top of the fact that she deserved to get paid and she deserved to really, also have the victory lap of the studio saying, yes, we were wrong. Please help us. And she kindly, generously helped them, right? Did Neve Campbell do it for the money? Maybe. But regardless, the consequence is Neve Campbell taking the money, navigated the franchise away from something terrible into a better place, and in a place that allowed her more agency and control over the franchise, right? So, so imagine this. Imagine okay, so the studio goes to Neve in December or January of 23, 24. And Neve says, nope, I'm not doing this. I stand with Melissa. Scream, there would be no Kevin. There would be no Courtney. There would be no Jasmine and Mason. There would be no new cast of such popular people like Anna Camp, Joel McHale, McKenna Grace, et cetera, et cetera. There would be none of that. There would, so either Scream probably would have died outright. Like Scream 6 would have just been the last movie and it would have just gone into obscurity for a while. Or we would have gotten a truly terrible, like straight to DVD quality sequel that showed a more pathetic version of the IP. And Neve Campbell said, no, neither of those are happening. We're going to continue on and save the franchise for the fans. And maybe for her own legacy. Maybe she felt like this was her getting to do Sydney's story the right way, right? But the thing is, Neve Campbell has always been something good for the franchise. Like I kind of documented, in the beginning, with being an amazing final girl, having an amazing trilogy, having the brilliant Scream 4 reunion movie, and being a team player despite not really being respected in Scream 5, and then flat out not being respected in Scream 6, but then being away from the franchise, coming back in to solve a scandal that she had nothing to do with, zero involvement in. She didn't have to do this. She wasn't involved, but she came back in and cleaned it up because that's what a leader does. And going back to the Taylor Swift song, she protects the family. She protected Scream from a really bad fate. A true leader, in my opinion, doesn't put her people in jeopardy. She could have easily walked away and just didn't give a shit, but she didn't. She did the hard thing. She made the hard calls, and she put everything into motion to make Scream 7 happen. So whatever happens with Scream 7, if it's a success or a failure, whatever, it doesn't really matter. I think that Neve Campbell at least got to have her say in Scream 7, and the franchise wasn't permanently left on this sour note of something that didn't even really involve what the franchise was about. And it's just interesting to me because to look at Neve Campbell's contributions to Scream, I feel as though there was a moment after Scream 5 where people, the new age fans, really rejected Sydney and tried to minimize her contributions to the Scream franchise, and that Neve just didn't matter anymore. And it created this weird dichotomy out there in the world of Scream, where I feel like it started this weird stand war. Either you're a Neve fan or you're a Melissa fan. And even so, when I made this post, I got this weird response. It was like, you Neve stans won't erase Melissa's legacy. It's girl. But the thing is, I want to kind of say this is I don't even know, it doesn't make sense to me that you could be a Neve stan. Like, yes, there are specific stans of specific actresses. Like, oh my God, they're my favorite thing ever. Like, I would say that I'm probably a stan of like Juliana Margulies from The Good Wife, or Sarah Michelle Gellar, or, I love Neve and Courtney, but I don't think I'm a stan of them specifically outside of Scream. Like, I'm a stan of them because of Scream and because of their characters in Scream. Like, in the Oscar world, like, I was a stan of Nicole Kidman. I'm a stan of Taylor Swift, right? Where there's like this blind love for an actor. And those people do definitely exist for Neve. I like those people. I'm friends with those people. But I think that they are cherry-picked among the, big bucket of Scream fans, right? I think to be a Neve fan is to be a Scream fan in a lot of ways. And I think when you look at the franchise holistically, not just, the time period between February of 2022 and all of 2023, I think that Scream fans equal Neve fans. At least that's how I see it. I don't see them as a differentiated thing. I think that like there was this weird forced stan war by the younger people who were insecure about the new generation of characters. We're never going to have the same level of credibility that the trio did. And there was always this like false equivalency. And it kind of bothers me. Like being in 5, 6, 7 movies is much different from being in 2 movies. And to put equal weight on them, like, is something that I feel like is very forced, very wrong. I think it's okay to respect both of them, but the core 4 isn't the trio. And to act as though you either are a Melissa fan or you're a Neve fan, that's weird to me. I think that like most Neve fans are just Scream fans, right? When you look at the holistic view of the franchise from Scream 1, Scream 2, Scream 3, Scream 4, Scream 5, and then it's just like this new era where people were trying to kind of like devalue the original films in order to justify, that Scream 5 and 6 were more worthy, that they did, it's just weird. It's a weird thing. To recharacterize Scream fans as, oh, you're just Neve fans, right? Like that to me it lacks historical context. Like that'd be like, saying, imagine this. And it's hard to see because we're kind of like in the middle we're in the thick of it. But imagine like people saying like, oh, it's just us talking about Halloween. Like people like who love Scout Taylor Compton or Danielle Harris in her 2 movies. They each had 2 movies that they were the main characters for, right? Danielle had Halloween 4 and 5. Scout had the 2 Rob Zombie movies. Imagine their fans being so catty and saying, oh, well, you Jamie Lee Curtis fans, blah, 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 blah. Like, as opposed to Scout and Danielle fans. Like, I just don't believe that Scout Taylor Compton is weighed in the same way as Jamie Lee Curtis, right? Like, they aren't the same, as much as you want them to be the same, as much as you have a burning love for the new actors, they aren't the same, the contributions, the history, the historical context, it's not the same. And especially because like Neve Campbell gets to come back now, there's just like this weird internet, bubble thing, but it doesn't matter. So I want to end this discussion in a very personal way. I have kind of a confession. So at the beginning of October 1st, there was a logo that was published by the Scream accounts on social media of the Scream 7 logo. And it was exciting because it's the first real moment of Scream 7 actually living and breathing out in the world and not just our anticipation of it, right? It was something released from the studio that we will see forever, which is the logo for Scream 7. It wasn't the poster, it wasn't a trailer, but it was something. Because it's exciting, right? Because it means like, oh, we're moving forward. Scream 7's actually happening. We can't wait to see it, right? But it's just a logo, right? It's just like, it's a black image with just like a word on it and a number. But it's still exciting. So it was posted online. And while I would say like, 2/3 of the comments on social media were positive, excited, anticipatory, there was a good third of it that it felt like, oh, wow, it's been 2 years since all of this happened. Literally 2 years, because Melissa was let go, or at least it was announced in November of 23, and here we are in November of 25. It's been 2 full years. It feels like time hasn't moved on for certain people. There was a lot of negativity. There was a lot of boycott talk. There was a lot of trolling. There was a lot of just mean comments being hurled at Neve, being hurled at the IP of Scream. And again, very political. I experience this sometimes too, where, it's hard for me. I'll post something, and even, on any platform, let's just say I post something on Facebook, I will still get all the time just people yelling at or talking about this or putting Palestine flags in the comments. And I hate that. I hate it. I kind of got down in the month of October. I had these crumbling feelings about Scream that it was tainted forever. And like, it made me feel so defeated. Like, here we are, we've come so far. We're about to get a new movie, and yet the people are still yelling about the same things and trying to hurt the movie and hurt the IP and hurt Neve and hurt something that people like me love so much. And like, that's something that's a hobby for us. And that it made me feel so down. Like, I was like, oh wow, maybe Scream will never escape this. Maybe there is a part of Scream that has been ruined forever because it has been intertwined with Israel and Palestine. And because of everything that's happened, it's made me feel like everything relating to Scream is controversial. And it trickled down even to my little podcast. Like, I'm not even officially tied to the studio in any shape, way, or form. And that's what happens whenever things become unprofessional and activism kind of takes over what's supposed to be mainstream and something that's supposed to be for everybody. Because once you open Pandora's box, you can't ever recover from it, let alone something like IP or a business. Once something like this happens, or once this becomes part of the image of a business, it may never go away. Maybe Scream will always be known as the franchise that is intertwined with Israel and Palestine. It makes me so fucking sad. It makes me so sad because a lot of people see Scream as entertainment and escapism. No one's looking to Scream to solve the tax code for the United States of America. That would be weird, you know? What if people, you know, because of the trolling online and like the bad vibes, like what if Scream really is just ruined? Like, we will never escape this type of discussion ever. It's not just Melissa's individual opinion. It's not just Spyglass's individual opinion as a corporation. It's not just Neve Campbell's opinions as an individual actor. It is that their words and that their actions trickle down to people who aren't as powerful as them, who don't have as bright of a spotlight as they do. And like, just like, you know, even I'm sitting here on my podcast, like, you know, all of the controversy that happened there, I didn't ask for, yet it has impacted me as someone who kind of has like a small business as it relates to Scream with my podcast, or even just as a social media profile. You know, it's trickled down and affected me in ways that I never asked for, that I don't want, that I fucking hate. And I'm severely disappointed by it, and I have no real control over it other than to just go with the flow of of the cards that I was dealt. You know, leaders have a strong hand in dealing those cards. And that's why I feel as though, you know, it's so important to look at Neve Campbell as the leader of the Scream franchise. And I think Neve has shown her attributes as a leader in more ways than one, not just bringing Scream 7 into existence and kind of saving the franchise, but also just the way that she's conducted herself with Scream 7. Like, for instance, you know, recognizing that Sam in Scream 5 was not it in terms of matching thematically with Wes Craven's films, or with his Scream 4 films, and how she understood Scream to be. I think it takes a leader to notice these things, like notice like, hey, this doesn't really feel like Scream. Let's talk about it. Let's go back to the drawing board. Recognizing a franchise that always prioritized the hero not being corrupted by violence, to then, you know, this new movie where the hero is secretly evil because of who her father was and her bloodline, like whatever. But also, you know, Neve kind of recognizing like, hey, we need to focus on suspense and character development more than we need to focus on the gore and the sensationalism. Like, that is also being a leader, like having the intuition and the foresight to know what's working and what's not working, and to speak up and to move forward in a proactive way. Like, that's what is called being a leader, because the way that she has conducted herself, it was about herself. It was about her role within Scream with her pay dispute. Like, that was her Sister Souljah moment. It was directly related to her as a businesswoman within this franchise. I've had a good energy about defending Scream 7 this whole time. I believed in it. I believed it was the right thing to do, was to support Scream and to support Neve. I wanted the Sydney movie personally, but I also thought it was the right thing to do for the people who listened to the show, for Scream overall. I didn't want Scream to die because of comments that were made about political issues, whether that be Melissa's or Spyglass's. And it bums me out that we were in this situation to begin with. And I guess maybe there's been a part of me that hasn't really allowed myself to be bummed out about the situation we're in, as opposed to just defending Scream and believing in Scream and being there as a soldier for Neve Campbell and Sidney Prescott and this new version of Scream that we're about to get with Scream 7. I guess it just hit me whenever the Scream 7 logo came out. I was like, oh, wow, we're never going to move past this. And I think that maybe I was wrong. I think I was being pessimistic at that point. I was being defeatist at that point. I think over time it will continue to shed. And for perspective's sake, there were a heck of a lot more positive comments online when the Scream 7 logo came out than negative comments. But still, I was still very down about it. And I was just kind of like, the month of October, I was kind of going through the motions with even just the podcast and my social media, like as a Scream person. I was kind of like the Taylor Swift song, I Can Do It With a Broken Heart. Like I was just kind of feeling sad and just not inspired. And it wasn't until like, I was doing this social media post with Neve Campbell as it relates to the father figure song, where I was like, oh, wow. Like, I feel like I have it back now. I feel like I have my spark back again. And realizing, that Neve Campbell is the leader. And like also, and here's the conclusion I've come to. Part of being a leader is being professional and understanding the business and weighing the interests of the cast, the crew, the talent, the studio, the public, the fans, balancing all those interests. That is what a leader is. And that's what I see in Neve Campbell. And that's kind of what she did with her return to Scream. And frankly, putting her neck out on the line, and standing alone, standing by herself before she had Kevin as the director, before she had Courtney Cox on her back. And let's be real, like Courtney Cox, it's very clear to me that Courtney Cox wanted to avoid as much controversy as possible, and she just wanted to slide through. She was one of the last people to be announced. Like she happened like if there were 10 cast members announced in the month of December, she was maybe like number 6 or 7, and her announcement came on the same day as like 2 other people's. It was like I forget like this, but it was like one of the new young teens and her and Anna Camp all on the same day. And the fact that she held out so long before officially signing or officially allowing her announcement to go out into the world, that to me just feels like she was letting Neve, letting Isabel, letting Kevin kind of take the heat, and she would just kind of slide in there. And and again, that's Courtney's choice. I hate this controversy too. I bet she didn't want to face any political blowback for joining the film, but I'm saying that Neve Campbell didn't really have that option. Her option was I either do it or I don't do it. And by doing it, she put her neck out there. She couldn't just slide in at the last minute and after everybody else had been announced and go on with the show. And I have to say, if Neve Campbell can do that, if Neve Campbell can put herself on the line, then, what am I feeling down about? Why do I have these crumbling feelings about people who just continue to troll, scream, and put negativity out? If Neve Campbell has the brass balls to do what she did, then we can all persist. I can too. I can follow her. And that's what a leader is. A leader protects the people below her. A leader guides everybody. A leader puts the good of the show before the good of themselves. There was only one person who could have inherited Wes Craven's mantle. And I think it's so appropriate that it is her. She's the only person who makes sense to inherit the leadership of the franchise. And I'm happy that she's being given this opportunity. The Scream Empire belongs to her. Her portrait's on the mantle. She protects the family. She has proven her professionalism over and over and over again. And I couldn't be more proud of her as the leader of Scream. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next segment of Scream with Ryan C. Showers. I'm your host, Ryan C. Showers, and joining me for this segment is the father figure. Everyone, please welcome Ashley. Hey, Ashley.
Are you saying I'm daddy?
In the segment everybody just heard, I probably called Neve daddy like 10 times.
I love it.
Daddy.
I love when a lady is daddy.
Me too.
Like the most appropriate.
So everybody, we are sitting here for a very special recording. I was hit with like this burst of inspiration based on an innocent post I made about Neve Campbell and her relation to the Scream universe. And it led to the episode you just heard, and it led to this Taylor Swift song of the day. But so Ashley, what is the Taylor Swift song of the day?
The Taylor Swift song of the day is what I believe is the only song Ryan and I agree with being our number 1 song on any album.
Mm-hmm.
So this is Father Figure. It is track 4 on The Life of a Showgirl. It was written and produced by Taylor Swift, Max Martin, and Shellback. There's also a credit for George Michael on the writing of this song. Taylor gave her, because there's no actual sample in the song from what the information I've read. It was that she took part of the line that he has in his song. So she got permission from his estate to use it. And George had actually lost rights to his masters, similar to Taylor had. So her giving it the writing credit will give his estate and whoever is in charge of his estate. So it's like giving the money to George versus the person who owns his masters. And that's from what I've heard is why they did it that way. Do I know for sure? No. And then this song, if I was going to describe it to someone, sounds like it's a mentor and a protege fighting, or like having a conversation in this song and almost like flipping the switch, and they flip positions on who's in power. Taylor Swift referenced Star Wars, so shout out Albert when she talked about this. She said Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. I would have said more of like an Anakin Obi-Wan type of moment, but
Mm.
to each their own. I'm not gonna take that from Taylor, but I mean, whoever has the higher ground, and we know who wins that battle. By the way, I love episode 3, so no one can fight me. But I love this song. I think the lyrics are so funny. They're so catchy. It's really another song, like another duo that it made me think of was Mrs. Loomis and Mickey, where she like really just uses him for what she needs and then like tosses him to the side, which I feel like this song is almost like making fun or like poking at her for doing that, like, or poking at a mentor for crossing the line. And it just kind of talks about like the shadiness of the entertainment world or any form of business. But
Well,
Ryan, my mentor, please go.
I don't know about that. Oh my God. But no, as Ashley alluded to, this song is that we know of, right? Where my favorite song of an album and Ashley's favorite song of an album match, I guess, all too well.
I was just about to say, but like that's like duh.
So I wonder, like, do we like the song for the same reasons? So just to confirm, Father Figure was your favorite whenever we first listened a couple of weeks ago, and is it still your favorite today?
Yes, it's still my favorite. I love just, like, the sonic, like, I can, like, I feel like I can feel it in my bones, that song, like, the way that, like, the production of it is so fun, but then I love, like, this dynamic of, like, almost feeling like you're watching a conversation take place, like, 2 mobsters or whoever it is. I just, like, see these 2 dual personalities, and then it's just, like, I feel like it's such, like, a storytelling song, and, like, I can picture, like, glamour and all this cool and, like, I wake up with this song stuck in my head all the time. I
Mm.
say all the time as if it's been out for, like, months,
For years.
but, I mean, I don't wake up with songs stuck in my head that often, and I've woken up with a song from Life of the Showgirl stuck in my head every day since this came out, and Father Figure is by far the one that is just constantly like, I'll be like, "'Cause my dick's bigger."
I mean, that's that moment where of the song, that was, like, the most shocking thing on the album up until that point. When she says, "My dick's bigger," it's just like, "Oh my god, Taylor." But no, it's my favorite song as well still. It's still my number 1 on the album. I can confidently say I would put it in, like, my top 10 favorite Taylor Swift songs because it does, like, both of the things she does really well. So, one, it's very writerly. There's a lot of, like, gangster allusions and, like, double meanings in the song, and she uses phrases from that we've heard in gangster movies for all of our lives, and she incorporates them into the song to be clever. So there's that element, but there's also a storytelling aspect to it where she's telling it could be a movie, just listening to, the beginning, the middle, the arc, and then the ending of the gangster protege relationship. And there's that too, but then underneath all of that, there is an autobiographical element to it that you could probably look at it in terms of her life and who, is she the protege? Is she the gangster? I think that you can look at it both ways. And she herself literally said that in the official release party of a Showgirl movie. But the song is so brilliant because, like, I think the first 2/3 of it are straight. She shoots straight with it, and then once it hits the bridge, the last minute of the song can be interpreted in so many different ways. It can be interpreted as though the ingenue overtakes the gangster. It can be interpreted as they're having a conversation. Like one person says one line, the other person says the other line, back and forth, back and forth. It could be interpreted that the gangster is lashing out at the ingenue, that the gangster got rid of the ingenue. It's so opaque. And it works in so many different ways and so many different levels. Every time I listen to it, I find a different line that could be interpreted in a different meaning. And that's the brilliance of it. We never know whose perspective she's singing from in the last third. And very thought provoking about like how people feel about betrayal. And like, the next thing I want to go to with you is like, I do like gangster stuff. Like, I have a soft spot for gangster movies, and I like the idea of playing with power. And betrayal is a theme similar to power that I find very compelling in art, in film, in TV, and stories. And this song is all about power and being betrayed by somebody you helped, and or it's about seizing the power for yourself, whether that in whatever shape, way, or form. Both of those speak to me in my soul. So, I mean, I love a badass kind of moment about like, especially like whenever a woman gets to like, kind of like stick it to the man, like that shit just like, it's like Coke for me, pun intended. So there's no reason that this isn't my favorite song on the Life of the Showgirl. I feel like this, in some ways, the song was made for me.
It just gives like this beautiful way of describing this relationship, which I think is like supposed to start as like, wow, the stars are aligning. I've met this person who's going to help me. and then you get deceived and you get hurt by this person in different ways. And I really think like somebody who is in some sort of toxic relationship, even like, depending on what that is, could relate to this. People could relate it to internet trolls. People could relate it to your favorite movie, like we're doing. But I just love how and then my favorite part is when she says, like, mistake my kindness for weakness, because that's like a Canadian motto. Because like people are like, oh, Canadians are so nice. And I'm like, yeah, until we're not. But I love that saying. And I like have this one image particularly that I like would love for to see, like, Neve in Scream 7, but I know we're gonna get into that, so I'm gonna save it till then. But this song just, like, makes me feel powerful and makes me feel like I could go accomplish something.
But like this episode, again, it just started out as a passing thing. I found a pretty picture of Nev and I was posting it on Instagram, and Father Figure's my favorite song. But it's crazy how much, especially the ending of the song, you can pick out parts of the lyrics that directly correlate to Neve Campbell's role in Scream 7 and her role in the Scream franchise. And basically my argument is that after Wes Craven passed, that there wasn't because I think he was the leader of the franchise for one to four. I think that's pretty indisputable. Once there wasn't really that father figure, there wasn't that gangster, there wasn't that person who was keeping their hand over Scream to make sure it was on track. There wasn't a singular vision that was pushing it forward. And I think that Neve should have been that person in Scream 5. I think she was the de facto person, but they didn't let her be the leader in Scream 5. And in Scream 6, literally, she was out and then she came back and cleaned up the mess. And now she is the daddy of Scream. I think that like how she solved all of the issues post Scream 6 and putting Scream 7 into motion shows that she is the leader of the franchise and she is the father figure. Her portrait's on the mantle. She's the one who literally covered up the scandals, And to quote what you just said, mistake her kindness for weakness and find your card canceled. I think the studio probably thought she was weak or unnecessary, something outdated when it comes to Scream 6, and she proved, oh no, I'm the one who I'm the one who makes and breaks. So, any general thoughts about Neve before we go into the lyrics?
I just love her so much and I admire her, and I completely agree that she is the thing that keeps Scream alive in some ways and keeps it going. Like I feel like without Sydney, like this franchise wouldn't be the same, and without having Neve play her so with such empathy and care, and it feels like she truly loves this character. Having like the opposites but the same strength in Gale, I think is really beautiful. The duality of those two characters and how they're similar and how they're different. But I love how Neve is just so captivating and she's just beautiful in whatever way that word can mean. When I think of Neve Campbell, I think of the word beautiful, not just like her exterior, but like the
Her
way that
inside.
she giggles in interviews and how she talks and just like her presence. It feels so honest and genuine, and I just adore her. I think she's lovely.
Well, so let's kick off with some lyrics here. So it starts out, when I found you, you were young, wayward, lost in the cold, blah, 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 blah. You remind me of a younger me. I saw potential. I think this is so interesting because, like, there's a whole life cycle that goes down in this song. And Neve has gone through a whole life cycle in Scream, right? Whenever she started in Scream 1, she was young, maybe not lost in the cold, but she wasn't, the actress and didn't have the career that she has today and the longevity. And it's just so interesting to see that Neve went from that beginning, like literally the ingenue with Scream 1996, and now she's the reason we have Scream 7. That without her, Kevin Williamson wouldn't have come back. None of the other actors would have come back. Scream 7 probably would have just disintegrated and died, but she pushed through the controversy, kind of put her neck out on the line to make sure that the IP wasn't going to be tarnished. And that arc, it starts here whenever she was young. And now I feel like Neve can look at Isabel, right? Isabel May, who plays her daughter, and maybe think, hey, you remind me of a younger me. I see potential in you. So maybe the cycle will continue here. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I love that. And one of my favorite parts is when they say they want to see you rise, they don't want you to reign. I feel like that's such a great example for like box office and how Neb was treated before six, of just being like, okay, well, like you are pretty much the reason why this franchise is this franchise,
Mhm.
because you can put anybody in a ghost face mask, any cool actor, and it can still be fun. But if you don't have that vulnerability from your cast, it doesn't work as well. And I feel like Nev is the reason why that continued and people wanted to see what Sydney was up to. And I think it's just being like they want you to rise, like they want you to be good for them, but they don't want you to reign. Like they don't want you to be in charge.
Yeah.
They don't want you to demand your worth. They don't want you to ask for what you deserve.
Look at her now.
And look at her now. And was really inspired that she made that decision because I think it was a really powerful one, and especially because we know that this franchise means a lot to her. Just like I like get goosebumps thinking about how she made that decision because I imagine it was a hard one. One, like just work in general is important, and then like keeping your name out there as an actor, but also like the criticism. Like I saw lots of criticism when she made that choice, and also like I think a lot of women were really like, "Thank you, like thank you for, like, being an example of someone saying, like, "You know what? You're not gonna give me what I deserve, so I'm out." And if I'm being completely honest, my opinion, I think it could have been better if she was in it.
Yeah, well, and isn't it funny, like, I think that a lot of people see Scream 6 as the worst film in the franchise, and then everything that happened after Scream 6 was a complete disaster and catastrophe, and it's so interesting, you know, it's the one time when she is away from Scream, is whenever all of this results, both on, like, the filmmaking art quality, but also just, like, the interpersonal politics and, like, just, like, kind of like the team kind of unspooling, right? So I think it's just interesting that how much her absence left a void. And again, this is why I think like she was the de facto leader in Scream 5. It's just they wouldn't let her lead. And I'm not talking about like the storyline and the screen time. I'm talking more so just about like the team aspect of the holistic kind of concept of a Scream team. So, but going on what you just said here. So the lines go, I pay the check before it kisses the mahogany green, which is Taylor's favorite part of the song, by the way. They want to see you rise. They don't want you to reign. I showed you all the tricks of the trade. All I ask for is your loyalty, my dear protege. And you're absolutely right about they want to see you rise, they don't want you to reign, because not only is this like spyglass at her, right? At the time of Scream 6, but I take it even a step further and more deeply, like because there was a time after Scream 5 came out, be through the end of Melissa's time in the franchise, where like the younger fans had so much resentment towards Nev. They did not want Nev to be in any more movies because they felt as though if Nev was there, she was taking away from Melissa and Jenna, and that she needed to be as far away from the films as possible. That's how I feel. Whenever I hear this line, they want to see you rise, they don't want you to reign. I don't know. It's just the immediate backlash she got from those people. So,
Yeah, I find that frustrating because I feel like a lot of those people are coming from, like, a point of view of, like, girl power, like, a lot of them use that, but I was like, "But you're like, why can't they all be involved?"
Mhm.
Like, I wanted to see Sam and Tara and Gail and Sydney and, like, throw in maybe some Kirby and Mindy. I wanna see them all kick ass. I don't want there to be a reason why one of these characters can't be in it with the other because of their age or whatever reason it is. Like, I wouldn't even go on the internet for, like, 3 months, but I it just really bums me out that there's, like, this point of view that they all can't have something good in the movie. Like, they all like, I think they all deserved it. I think they all worked hard. I liked the chemistry that was starting in Scream 5. I think moving on to Scream 6 could have been really, really fun having them all there. And I think it could have been a more dynamic movie having Neve in there and, like, working with the Carpenter sisters. Like, me loving Neve is no way saying that I wanna get rid of anybody else. It's just me, right? Like, I feel like there's room at the table for a lot of people. Like, I just can't imagine people being like, "Well, David Arquette's in this, so now, like, Mason Gooding's not gonna be in it anymore." That's just a bummer that
Yeah.
that was, like, even a narrative. It's like, why can't they all be part of this and, like, have fun together and, like, make a fun movie that empowers they all feel empowered.
And move forward together and like respect what's come before and respect what Nev has contributed and built up as a part of her career. So the chorus goes, I'll be your father figure. I drink that brown liquor. I can make deals with the devil because my dick's bigger. This love is pure profit. Just step into my office. I dry your tears with my sleeve. Leave it with me. I protect the family. And like, so Ash, any thoughts on the chorus?
The "I protect the family" line, that is what I imagine Sydney saying at the end of Scream 7, crazy fight, she stabs Ghostface and, like, whispers in the ear, "I protect the family." And she is talking about all of her people. She's not
Mhm.
just talking about her obviously, she's talking about her babies, like, first, like, her kids, but she's gonna be talking about the kids in the neighborhood who are now being dealt this hand. She's gonna be talking about Gail. she's talking about all of these people that have been affected by these really stupid idiots who keep putting these masks on and invading her life. And I just like when I heard that, I literally got goosebumps and I was like, "Oh my god, this is Neve." I mean, like I could also see a Gail seeing something like that, but I like her being like the mom of this, like and her being like, "I protect my family," and like stabbing whoever she needs to. I just get goosebumps, y'all.
Well, and, like, again, I think that Taylor summarizes in, like, the gangster culture really well, and, like, again, literally the big dick contest of it all. But there's something especially apt, from the liquor to, the tears on your sleeve, and protecting the family. Like, I mean, this, the line, "I protect the family," it's, like, built for Sydney in Scream 7. Like, it couldn't be any more apt. But for me, I take it a step further, and I see it even more so just as Neve, the actress, Neve, the businesswoman, protecting Scream. That's how I mean, like, obviously, it literally applies because she's a mom. She protects her family, but I see it more metaphorically now, even through Neve as like the producer, who really got Scream 7 off the ground and brought it into existence. Okay, the bridge. I saw a change in you. They don't make loyalty like they used to. Your thoughtless ambitions sparked the ignition on foolish decisions, which led to misguided visions. How could anybody say that this album is badly written? Like I literally am like overwhelmed right now by so many words, so many syllables, so many. So everybody, fuck you if you think that Life of a Showgirl is badly written. I'm gonna read that again. Okay, I saw a change in you. They don't make loyalty like they used to. Your thoughtless ambition sparked the ignition on foolish decisions, which led to misguided visions that to fulfill your dreams, you had to get rid of me. And this just, I love this part of the song so much. But like that line, to fulfill your dreams, you had to get rid of me. That is literally Neve talking about not being in Scream 6. That they did get rid of her. They literally got rid of her. They pushed her to the side in Scream 5 and they didn't pay her what she was worth in Scream 6. And that's what's so cool about Neve's journey and the song is that it flips. Now, after this is when she becomes the daddy because they come back to her. She's the one with the power and she assumes the daddy role. Ash?
Yeah, like, I immediately thought of Neve, like, like, in this like, in the real world, but also, like, "Your thoughtless ambition sparked the ignition on foolish decisions that led to misguided vision." Like, that is Billy Loomis. Like, that is, like, her being like, "Yo, Billy, you fucking idiot." Like, all of this happened because you couldn't handle your daddy issues. Go talk to your father figure instead of taking it out on me, dickhead. And then she's like, "You had to like, you literally had to get rid of me to fulfill your dream
Yeah.
because, like, you guys are psychos." I mean, we love them, but psychos. And, like, I literally was like, "You can take this from, like, the perspective of Sydney and the perspective of Neve, in my opinion." And I
Mhm.
think it's, like, the most, like, fun Scream connection that we've had in a long time to one of our Taylor songs. Like, I was just, like, itching to talk about this. Like, you were like, "We're gonna do it." And I was like, "Can we do it right now?"
Oh my gosh. Well, and who else it applies to? I mean, like, Jill, her thoughtless ambition sparked the ignition. Her foolish decision was misguided, and she tried to get rid of Sydney. Like that's how she would fulfill her dreams. Like, oh my
Well,
god.
all of them, all of them, and if anybody is the life of a showgirl, it's Miss Jill. I am sorry, but she would be like, "This is my album, guys. This and Reputation." She'd be like, "She wrote this about me," with her dairy in hand.
That's so funny. It's so true. Like the reason why I was being shady there is people who because like there has been narrative online about in a discourse that her songwriting decreased in quality in The Life of a Showgirl, which I just completely disagree with. I mean, literally, I guess I never realized just how well written that line is. Your thoughtless ambition sparked the ignition on foolish decisions, which led to misguided visions. Oh my god! Even just those two sentences, mind blown. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's just like a really silly narrative. It happens every album.
Coming back to the Neve arc of the songs, I really want everyone to like just hold my hand here. Okay, hold my hand and hold Ashley's hand. We're holding your hands here. Imagine Neve Campbell, these words coming from the perspective of Neve Campbell. Okay, so the verse before was, to fulfill your dreams, you had to get rid of me, which happened, and then she says, I protect the family. And then this is the switch. Okay, this is where, hypothetically, the heroine of the story kind of usurps the gangster and she becomes the one who's in charge. She becomes the powerful one. So I was your father figure, blah blah blah. You made a deal with this devil. Turns out my dick's bigger. You want to fight, you found it. I've got the place surrounded. You'll be sleeping with the fishes before you know you're drowning. Whose portrait's on the mantle? Who covered up your scandals. Mistake my kindness for weakness and find your card canceled. You pulled the wrong trigger. This empire belongs to me. My God. And like my whole point here is Scream does belong to her. Like this empire does belong to Neve Campbell. But the whole point of the argument that I've made in this episode is that like Neve has earned the right to call this empire of Scream her franchise. Not only what she contributed with the original trilogy, with Scream 4, being like a revolutionary final girl in general, coming back and being a team player with Scream 5, all of that. But she was not involved in the scandal, right? And she came in and she cleaned up the mess. She has a new movie going forth, with a really cool, interesting director that people are actually excited about. She has everybody on board. She has more than everybody on board. She has dead characters on board. This is her empire. She deserves the title of the daddy, of the father figure, of the gangster, of the leader of the franchise. And I just think it's so interesting because, yes, one, her portrait is definitely on the fucking mantle, but two, it's so interesting that Taylor literally uses the phrase, who covered up your scandals, when Neve Campbell literally worked through the scandal to have a positive outcome for the IP and the fans. So
yeah, again, I feel like you can relate it directly to Neve. You can relate it directly to Sydney. I really hope that Neve can draw inspiration from how she's portrayed Sydney and Sydney's strength and use it for her own personal story. And then at the same time, use all of this that's gone on, like to fuel her performance for Sydney as well. I feel like both can probably like heal a person. Like I feel like her performance as Sydney has definitely helped me heal in some ways, as silly as that sounds. Like I found her so inspiring of like working through all the stuff that she's gone through. And I'm like, if Sydney can do this, I can do this, guys. Like I got this. But when she's like, I've got the place surrounded, you'll be sleeping with the fishes before you know you're drowning. That is Sydney to a T. Like she's like, you don't know who you're messing with.
yeah.
You don't know what this is. And I feel like that's also Neve, because I feel like she comes like, I just feel like she was like, okay, we're going to do this when it makes sense. And we're going to have a lot of fun with this. We're going to get the right people involved, like having Kevin, I mean, and maybe give some nods to what the fans really, really want. And I think we're getting that. Sounds like we're getting something exciting, and it sounds like we're getting something that she's proud of and excited to be part of. And I think that's what the father figure song really describes, is being maybe lower on the call sheet or whatever it is at the beginning, and then developing in this power. And I don't know if when she started playing Sydney in the first movie, if she knew that like how many years down the road she'd be helping to produce and come up with all of these things and be the one who was really driving this project, especially after like her mentor passed away. And I think like if anybody says that there's anybody else that is like the person that is like, it was Wes, like obviously before. Obviously people could say like Courtney and David are the backbone and heart of these franchises too. I don't think that both of them would be like, no, but like Neve is the girl. Neve is our person. Without her, it doesn't feel the same. And like I just feel like, I think she is like the daddy with the big dick, and then we've got the heart and Dewey, and we've got like some backbone and Gail, and the mouthpiece on Gail too. And you've got a perfect package right there.
Ashley is Frankensteining the body parts of the trio. Right?
Like all of the Wizard of Oz, like going with Dorothy characters together just now.
Well, but for me too, like, the journey of Neve, like also just like believing in herself and believing in her truth about her professional role. Like she wasn't making a stand whenever she exited Scream 6. It wasn't a stand about a personal vanity project of hers. This was about her worth and her value in her professional role. And it's just, and kind of like the spirit of the song, which is like someone who is underestimated, then growing and becoming the one that's revealed to have the true power. That is Neve Campbell as it pertains to the Scream franchise. Like she, stepped aside and she was her truth, with Scream 6. She stood by herself, and that paid off in the long run and allowed her to be the one to come in and display who is really in charge, who really has the power. And I'm just so proud of her. I'm so proud of her story. Like you couldn't write like a story like this, But to your point too, I don't think that Neve, the ingenue, at the beginning of the song, right, would have ever expected that she would be faced with, the biggest accomplishment of her career, which is the Scream franchise, in the turmoil that it was between Scream 6 and 7 and having to come in and agree to do the project, put her name on the project, find a director, and make the movie happen and keep everybody on board, all of the different interest groups, bringing everybody together and bringing the fan base back together. I don't think she ever would have imagined having to do that. I think she deserves to be like a full producer credit. Like, I mean, what she did to make Scream 7 happen and to revive the franchise is, I don't know if there's been another example of an actor doing that for a movie franchise like this. Like, and if this were anybody else, Scream probably would have died. We would have had Scream 6 and it would have gone away for years and years, probably. But it didn't, because Neve is where the power is. And like, I like you brought up the you'll be sleeping with the fishes before you know you're drowning. I've got the place surrounded. Neve had the place surrounded because we all had her back. Everybody who has met her at a convention, who has met her, on a Zoom call or anything, we all have a deep place in our heart for Sidney Prescott and Neve Campbell, and we had her back.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so beautiful, and I think a lot of people were really I think I've touched on this already, but I think a lot of people were really inspired, especially I think a lot of women were really inspired by her being like, "No, I'm not getting what I'm worth."
Ash, any final thoughts, and where can they find you online?
Yeah, I think everybody should go and listen to the song. It's super fun. It's super catchy. It hypes you up. It makes you picture all of your favorite badasses just taking over. You can find me on Instagram at squirrelandspud9. There you'll find my Etsy store and the Scream game of the week that Ryan and I make every Wednesday. So please go and check those out. We have so much fun making them. And I love seeing all of your comments, even if they're mean.
Ash is like, it's okay, leave it with me. I'll protect the family. Exactly. Well, Ash, thank you so much. And everybody, thank you for listening to this epic episode. We will see you next time.
All copyrighted material used or referenced in this show belong to their rightful owners and made possible by the Fair Use Act.
And number 3, never, ever, ever, under any circumstances say, "I'll be right back," because you won't be back.
Get another beer, you want one?
Yeah, sure.
I'll be right back!